I'm Ed O'Keefe, and this is the Washington Week Extra, where we pick up online where we left off on air. And Carol, I actually do want to pick up right where we left off regarding the cabinet. As we mentioned, Defense Secretary Mattis is now in place. Homeland Security Secretary Kelly is in place, both of them retired Marine generals. But there's still a lot of government to fill out. And I know Republicans had expected to have as many as 6 or 7 confirmed on Friday, and that didn't happen.
It didn't. It's gone a little slower than they would have liked. They'll also probably have the CIA director early next week. And the president was supposed to go to the CIA to basically be there for the swearing in of his CIA director, but also try to repair some of these rifts that have happened during the transition between him and the intelligence agencies. General Mattis is the defense secretary, is somebody who Democrats even openly during his hearings were looking forward, saying we're counting on you, which can, as Joe Biden would say, work for you or against you. But also, you know, you've seen in this national security team that's coming together, there's some friction between the president's national security advisor and that team. And then he still doesn't have a Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. There were some questions about how his hearings went, whether he performed well enough or not, and that didn't move as fast as they thought. And then you have a host of other ones that are waiting. And hopefully, I mean, the goal, I think, is for them to get them done rather quickly after the next week. But he is taking over at a time when he was trying to put forward a very ambitious agenda, but doesn't necessarily have the people in place that he wants to carry out that agenda.
It's a predominantly white and predominantly male cabinet. There's been some talk of that this week. Do we think that the Trump administration really thinks about that at all, or is that going to be a consideration as they fill out the rest of the government? It
was a consideration, and they thought about it during the transition. I think clearly they don't feel the need to care, frankly, in the sense that when you look at his cabinet, he picked the people that he wanted to pick, and he didn't set down kind of markers that President Obama during the transition set very specific things that he wanted in his cabinet. He wanted, you know, a Republican in his cabinet. Donald Trump didn't do that. He wanted, you know, his cabinet was diverse, and we just haven't seen that.
Peter, it was a remarkable day, in part because most of the former presidents and first ladies were there, most notably, of course, Hillary Clinton, who was sitting there watching what she probably thought would have been a better day for her had things gone differently. I'm just curious what you thought of all of them being there, and Clinton's not performance so much as appearance.
Right. It is an extraordinary thing about American democracy that certainly over the last 50 years anyway, with only a few exceptions, the loser in a presidential race almost always seems to be on stage when the winner takes office, because they're vice president or a senator, or in this case a former first lady, and by custom they have to be there. It's also sort of ritualistically masochistic, I think, because it can't be an easy thing to walk out there when you thought you had it in the bag, as she clearly did, and to have to watch this person who she doesn't really respect take the oath that she thought she should have taken. She wore her white suffragette, you know, dress that she made famous during last year's campaign. If you watch the footage of her before she actually walked out on stage, her face was very grim. She seemed very unhappy. She did a game effort of putting a smile on when she did go out in public, but she obviously couldn't have had a great time. President Trump did graciously pay tribute to her at the lunch afterwards, asked her to stand and be applauded, but you have to imagine she wanted to get out of town as fast as she could.
The only one absent, of course, was former President George H.W. Bush and his wife Barbara, who were recuperating at a Houston hospital. The word on Friday was that they were recovering and had watched the inaugural festivities. And Yamiche, Peter mentioned the suffragette outfit that Hillary Clinton wore. A lot of suffragettes, in essence, will be in the streets of Washington this weekend for this anticipated Women's March, which is not only happening here in Washington, but of course across the country in a lot of other ways. This came together in a remarkably organic way in the wake of the election.
It came together in a really organic way, mainly because a lot of the issues that people had with Donald Trump, apart from people thinking that he might be racist or that he might have populist views, but the fact that he had that Access Hollywood tape and that women really felt as though he was someone who didn't really respect women. So these are the women, of course, not the 53% or so that voted for him, but the opposition women. So this march is supposed to be more than 100,000 people are expected to go down on the Mall. I've talked to some of the people who are going. I've talked to at least 3 families who are bringing all all generations of their family, so the grandmother, the mother, the daughter. So there's a lot of people going to this march to not only oppose him, but also give themselves something to talk about and organize and plan for the future. So a lot of these women are really readying themselves for the next 4 years.
Do we know what this is designed to be for? We know what it's against. It's pretty much against the new president. But what else are they really trying to advocate for?
Well, the women that I've talked to are kind of in the same situation as the Democrats right now. They're confused because they don't know exactly what Donald Trump is going to do. Is he going to create a Muslim registry? Is he going to completely repeal the Affordable Care Act and not replace it with anything? Is he going to somehow maybe try to roll back? I mean, even though he's not on the Supreme Court, some way attack Roe v. Wade. So I think there's a lot of stuff there's a lot of things that people don't know are going to happen, and there are a lot of questions still in the air. But basically, everybody that I talk to, they list climate change, they list racial justice, they list immigration. I mean, there's a long list of issues that people are worried about. And remarkably, a lot of people are saying that they're ready to fight about the issue that doesn't maybe directly affect them. So even though I've talked to some people who are Christian, white women, they're ready to fight for immigrants, or they're ready to fight about Muslim issues. So there are people that are just ready to fight in general.
And the emphasis on people. There are men who plan to show up as well.
There are a couple men.
There'll be 3 or 4 of them. Men, not me, but men in general. Dan, you adroitly wrote in Friday's paper about the fact that the new president pointed this out, and it's worth reminding folks that he didn't start all this. And by this, we mean the rancorous political environment that we live in, that this is something that really has been snowballing over the course now of almost 2 decades.
Yes, I mean, this country's clearly divided. We know that. It's very divided over his presidency, but it's been divided for quite a while. President Obama, though his approval ratings are up at the end of his presidency, ended up as the president with the biggest gap between approval among Democrats and approval among Republicans. And so some people have said he's the most polarizing president in our history. But George W. Bush was the second most in terms of that measure, and Bill Clinton was third most. So what we've seen over 2 decades is a pulling apart of the political system. There is not only rancor, there is passionate anger toward the opposition. The sense of goodwill is gone. People suspect the worst of the opponent, of the other side, and that's something that anybody who won this office, if Hillary Clinton had won, she would have to be dealing with that same problem. The issue for Trump is that, in a way, he used those divisions, and some ways stoked those divisions successfully in his campaign to knock off the Republican establishment and then to defeat Secretary Clinton. So there was nothing in the campaign that he did to try to begin to, create a thaw in that icy relationship between the left and the right, or the Republicans and Democrats, red and blue.
And his inaugural address, many would say today, added to that deep freeze. So We'll see how he thaws everything over the next 4 years, 8 years perhaps. That's it for this edition of the Washington Week Extra. While you're online, check out some fun facts about presidential inaugurations through history, including 3 where the outgoing president chose not to attend their successor's swearing in at all. That's on the Washington Weekly News Quiz. I'm Ed O'Keefe on behalf of all of us here at Washington Week. We'll see you next time. Take care.